Okay, so we're learning the Maimer Sihyeh Mishakelo Tafshin Yud Beis. In last week's year, we began the Maimer, and very short, the Maimer is the Dibra Maschel is Sihyeh Mishakelo V'Akor Ba'atzcha, that there won't be a woman who loses her children or a woman who's barren who cannot carry children in the first place in your land. It's Misperi Yamecha Amalins. The Rebbe says, "I will fill the number of your days." And the Rebbe says that the idea of Sihyeh Mishakelo V'Akara has in its two ideas. There's two concepts over here. There's 2 points. First one is that the Rebbe is telling us a person cannot have this Inyan of being a Mishakela and Akara, losing a child, which we'll see at the end of the Maimer what that means, or not being able to give birth in the first place, is something that a person is not allowed to have. What does that mean in Aveda? That was working his way towards explaining what that means in Aveda. But B'negel Inyanenu, it's also a bracha. It's also a bracha that David just says that things will be good for you. There won't be a woman who loses her children. There won't be a woman who can't have children. Now, similarly, the pasuk before this one also says that Hashem will bench your food. The David will give bracha in your food and in your drink, and He will also bench your health. The David will remove any disease from amongst you. So we have over here brachas for bani chayim u'zayna, right? For all the 3 categories that are general categories that include within them all of the needs of a person. The pasuk is giving us over here bracha for it. And the Rebbe says, however, there's a condition. This condition is that you will get these brachas if you serve the Eibishter. And this is what the Rebbe is stelling sich on. This is what the Rebbe is going deeper into. What's this idea that you have to serve the Eibishter? Why? Because the Rebbe says, let's start first with the simplest understanding of serving somebody. What does it mean to serve somebody? So you have a master, and you have his servant. And the master is a human being. Even though he's a human being on a very, very high level, nevertheless, he's still human. And since he's human, he's missing things. And therefore, he needs somebody else, even though that person is on a much lower level than him, and that's why he's his servant. Nevertheless, he needs the servant to do certain things for him so that the needs of the master or the will of the master could be fulfilled. So that's the idea of Aveda, where you have 2 parties. You have the one above who's higher but is missing something, and you have the one who's lower but can contribute something. And then the one who's lower also has an aliyah because he contributed something to the masters. The Rebbe says this works in Elam Hazah when you're talking about a human master and a human servant. However, when you're talking about the Eibishter, the idea of to serve the Eibishter, in other words, that we would be contributing something to the Eibishter, we're giving him something that he's missing, can't be. The Eibishter isn't missing anything. So what's this idea of in other words, the whole idea that a Yid needs to serve the Eibishter because the Eibishter needs us kiviyachol to serve him doesn't exist. The Eibishter isn't missing anything. So what's the idea of the second thing that the Rebbe points out is that you find in Chazal stirs, contradictions. Certain psukim say one thing, and certain psukim say the total opposite. One pasuk says, or we'll start with the Medrash, where it says, "V'chi ichbas leila kadosh baruch hu im sheichet me'atzavar lemisha sheichet min atzavar lemisha sheichet min ha'erev." Does the Eibishter really care? Does it really matter to the Eibishter if somebody shechts from the neck, which is the proper place to shecht from, or if somebody shechts from the back of the neck, from the spine? What difference does it make to the Eibishter? It can't. It doesn't. It can't. It can't be of any significance to the Eibishter. So why do we have these mitzvahs to do this? We have the mitzvahs to do this. The mitzvahs are here in order to refine the creations, that people should be purified and elevated. So too we find a pasuk, as that Medrash brings a pasuk. So we see from this that nothing that we do, if we sin, we don't cause any effect in him. If we have a lot of sins, what does that do to the Eibishter? And on the other hand, if we're righteous, that also doesn't give anything to the Eibishter. So l'chura, there's no meaning of Aveda. But then we find other psukim, opposite psukim, that say that through the Aveda of Yidden, we can cause that Adonai, the Shem Adonai, should have an added thing in it, that it's going to have a Hagdol, it's going to become greater. And so too in the opposite sense, we find that Surah Yilot Choteshi, that when the Yidden do Averis, so they cause a weakness by the Eibishter. So which one is it? And besides the fact for which one is that, there are stirs in the Chazal. How can we make sense out of it? Okay, so in order to explain this, the Rebbe gives a general explanation that there are two general levels that we could be talking about. We could be talking about Seder Ishtalshalus, or we could be talking about higher than Seder Ishtalshalus. In Seder Ishtalshalus, the Rebbe spoke about it with the great Arichis. We're going to include the Kalim of Atzilus and the Eris of Atzilus, and not only that, the source of the Eris of Atzilus, which is Arich. And in all of those levels, since they are a likus, the way likus lowered itself towards this world, so therefore what happens in this world affects those higher levels, even if they're extremely high levels beyond ishtalshalus, such as arich. However, then you have a level that's atik, in other words, that it's netak, it's removed entirely from this world, and it's on that place that we say that Aveda is taka not negeya. That over there, what people do down here, taka makes no difference. Okay? So here we have a way of understanding all of the various Ma'amari Chazal and the Psukim, that from some of them it sounds like the Eibishter, it does matter to the Eibishter if we serve him. From the other ones, it's mashma that it does not matter to the Eibishter if we serve him. So the ones that say that it does matter to the Eibishter if we serve him and it makes a difference are talking about in levels of Hishtalshalus or even the source for Hishtalshalus. But the Psukim and the Ma'amari Chazal that say that it does not matter to the Eibishter, over there we're talking about levels that are beyond Hishtalshalus entirely, not even a source for Hishtalshalus, and over there it does not matter. These ideas that the Rebbe is talking about, especially where the Rebbe is going to go next, can be much more appreciated, but I can't bring it out because I don't have all of the information. But it's worth it to mention that there are entire Sfarim and there were entire generations and entire ways of serving the Eibishter, Adayim Azeh, communities that serve the Eibishter, where they remain at these levels. In other words, where their service to the Eibishter only reaches so far, and it's only something that's connected to this world in some way. So there's levels of Kedusha, there's holiness, there's Seder Hishtalshalus, there's Atzilus, there's the Malachim, the Echolis, the Sphiris, never mind the Eris of the Sphiris. Very, very high stuff. But to say that a Yid has a connection to the Eibishter, that's Negei until Atzmus, they couldn't be Megala that. The Sfarim, which are the source for these communities and these ways of serving the Eibishter, that they base it upon, which is all in Torah, were before the Gili of the Baal Shem Tov, before the Gili of Teres HaChasidus, and therefore it was before this Getliche revelation, this godly revelation, to say that no, a Yid is connected to Atzmus, and therefore he can serve, and it makes a difference to Atzmus, because that's what's all of it saying, that's what the Eibishter wants. So now we're going to, keeping that in mind, just so we appreciate a little more what the Rebbe is discussing here, we'll continue. And it's the bottom of page 166 in the original print of the Maimer. And the paragraph starts with Omnam. Omnam, the Emerson, hopefully this week we'll learn 3 Sifim. One of them talks about different levels in the Likus and Aveda in general. The next one talks about Aveda on the level with Yireh. And the final one that we'll learn today, hopefully, talks about Aveda with the Ava, through Ava. Okay, so let's get started. Still, this explanation that there are some that where can we serve the Eibishter? Where does our service of the Eibishter make a difference and matter only in the levels of Seder Ishtalshalos? This is not a sufficient explanation. Why not? It's explaining Chassidus. The pasuk said, in this pasuk of there's a contradiction from the beginning of the pasuk to the end, and he details it. The beginning of the pasuk says like this: you will serve the Eibishter, and he will bless your bread and your water, which this is what's called a lashon nister. He's going to explain it himself at length, so I won't touch it over here. That I will remove disease from amongst you, which this is in the direct tense, as though he's speaking for himself. So this is a contradiction. Is it somebody who's speaking indirectly or somebody speaking directly? and he's going to take it apart now in detail. According to what the Ramban writes in his Hakdama for his Pirush on the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah, he did not write it as somebody who's speaking about himself. Rather, how did he write it? And what style and what tense of speaking did he write it? Like a third person. So he wrote the Torah in the third person. I know, and the Rebbe now explains in detail what the Ramban is saying. I know, Arbas, as far as the first four Sfarim in the Torah, because the Sefer HaChamishi is called Torah Moshe. It's Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it on his own, and over there Moshe Rabbeinu does refer to himself in the first. What's that? How do you say it? In the first term, in the first. But he speaks directly about himself. Okay, we'll see what it says. It doesn't matter the exact word for it. So
third party.
The third party. How do you say the first party? You say the first party. He speaks directly about himself. He speaks directly about himself. Let's leave it at that. I don't have to get stuck on a word. So he says like this: Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the first four chumashim as a third party who's speaking. He didn't write it in a style where he's talking about himself for himself. Then all of the psukim that say Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe wouldn't say Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe. Instead, they would say Vaydaber Hashem Elai. Hashem spoke to me. Moshe Rabbeinu is writing the Torah. He's writing it in the first person. That was the word I was looking for. He's writing it in the first person. So he would say that Hashem spoke to me, but he doesn't. But he's also not speaking from the perspective of the second party of the Eibishter. Then he should have said, I spoke to Moshe. If he was writing it on behalf in the sense where the Eibishter is telling us what happened over here, so he would have wrote it that the Eibishter says, I spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. Rather, how does Moshe Rabbeinu write the Torah? It's a third party describing to you what two other parties are doing. It's not Havaya that's speaking, and it's not Moshe that's speaking. The Torah, who's speaking the Torah? It's the third party who's describing to you what's edited itself as Vaydaber Havaya el Moshe. He's telling you that this thing happened. Hashem spoke to Moshe. The Shlishi Hamidaber, who's this Shlishi Hamidaber? Who's this third party that's talking? This is Atzmus Umuhu, Saint Sof Baruch Hu, Shalamayel, Mebchina, the Shem Havaya Moshe. And this third party is higher. This Atzmus Umuhu, Saint Sof Baruch Hu, is higher than Havaya and is higher than Moshe. And he's telling you, Kimisaper, Ba'am, like he's saying, what happened between Havaya and Moshe. The Shem Havaya, Afshu Hoya Hoya Ke'echad, even though Shem Havaya is higher than existence as we know it. Because Sai Gashmistic existence and Sai Ruchnistic existence have the concept of time. Physical existence, like the Alter writes in Tanya, is made up of Zmanu Makim. So time, the passage of time, is a fundamental part of existence, and all existence exists within time. And I believe this is very well described in science today, that you have the space-time continuum, whatever that means, I have no idea. But that's something that we could also envision very simply in our head. If you want to say that something moved from one place to the next in physical space, how are you going to say something moved from one place to the next if there's no time? If there's no time. You say, a minute ago it was here, and now it's there. So now you could say that within space, something moved from here to there. If there's no time, so when was it here and when is it there? You can't, time, it's a fundamental part. The whole existence exists within time and space, or are merely details of time and space. So, and in Ruchnius, you also have the idea of time, which is the idea of Kdima ve'Ichur. What came first and what came second in Madeigas. Even though Gashmistic time does not exist in the upper worlds, in Atzilus you don't have time. Like we see, for example, in Shulchan Aruch, he says that why is it that in Eretz Yisrael, Shabbos starts 7 hours before it starts in New York? So when is the Kedusha of Shabbos? Is it then or is it before? Right? L'chura would make more sense to choose a place and say, we'll go by Yerushalayim when it's Shabbos in Yerushalayim. That's the time of Kedusha of Shabbos. He explains that the Kedusha of Shabbos is a spiritual light. It's a spiritual thing that's beyond physical